Welcome, hello everybody. My name is Adrian Malaguti.
I'm Pedro Algarvio.
And we will talk about using Jenkins and Salt to automate DevOps. Some background. I've been doing professional services for more than 17 years. My main experience is in services and configuration management. Just to let you know, I'm not a developer. I'm more on the IT ops side.
I'm Pedro Algarvio. I've formerly been a sound engineer, which liked hacking some code. And while doing that, I stumbled upon Salt and had a lot of fun coding for Salt, and that's what led me to actually start working for SaltStack and being here before you today. So that's mostly my background.
So the idea of our session is to give or talk briefly about continuous integration, talk about Jenkins and Salt. Pedro is going to show how we use Jenkins at Salt. He's going to show a live demo. Also, something I'd like to discuss with you is about some of the issues that, or challenges that we can find in the real world, in the especially in the enterprise organizations, when we try to converge DevOps and IT ops. So, topics: continuous integration and continuous automation. Some brief concepts. What is Jenkins? How we use Jenkins and Salt. We will talk about the SaltStack plugin for Jenkins. Probably some people doesn't know about it. There is a plugin for Salt, which is really useful. Again, Pedro is going to do a live demo. And at the end of the session, I'm going to show some installation and configuration notes. And finally, a QA. So, what is continuous integration? Probably some of you know about it, some others don't. So, continuous integration means to release code in a daily basis, daily or hourly or very frequently. It's part of. So we need. It cannot be done. It cannot be done by manual effort. So we need. I mean, of course it can, but if we are going to do this on a daily basis, we need some way we need some tools to automate this process. That where continuous integration systems come to play, like systems like Jenkins. There are others, of course, but probably Jenkins is the most used. So Jenkins will help us to automate the software build process. It's not only building; it's about testing, and this is where it comes very important when we are working with Salt, and we will talk later about it, but many of you, or many customers, ask me about how can we test states. When we create states in Salt, how can we test them? How can we release them? So that's the idea of this session, just to show how to use Jenkins and how to use Salt. Something we need as part of this process is a software code management repository, most commonly known as Git. Of course, there are others, but I was saying that Git is part of this process, so we need to release changes, and Git is able to to track those changes. Something very important when we use a continuous integration system is that it requires us to establish a good process, a well-established process. And this is very important, as later when we interact with IT ops, we need to have clear processes, good documentation, and we need to be able to, in case of failure, for instance, roll back. And all this is possible thanks to, in this case, Jenkins. So, benefits. It accelerates application deployment. It provides validation and testing controls, reduce time and manual efforts. And I think maybe this is the most important one. It drives consistency and knowledge sharing. I think this is very important. For instance, when I'm working with customers and I have to work with large groups, I have the DevOps groups and the IT ops groups, and they have different skills and different knowledge. And I think it helps to drive knowledge sharing. And I think it's very, very, very important. So, what is Jenkins? Jenkins is it's a leading open source automation server. Can I ask who of you use Jenkins here? Okay, mostly.
A lot of you.
A lot of you, okay, so I'm going to skip this. So, you already know, most of you know, it has a friendly interface, but also you can code your own testing. Okay, so let's go here. So, how do we use Jenkins and Salt? I want to talk about this because, again, when I'm on the field, customers ask, okay, how can I test my new states? So this is just a sample idea. You have DevOps people who knows how to use Jenkins, and you have a Salt master server, and in the background you have your Git server. So Jenkins and Salt should drive the automation test, okay, and move the new releases, the artifacts from DevOps to QA, and finally to IT Ops. And what I see in the field is that there is a sort of wall here between IT Ops and DevOps. So, people here in DevOps, those who use Jenkins, they have a great knowledge, of course, about and skills about building software, testing, and releasing. But in the real world, when it comes to deployment or provisioning this, especially in the enterprise environment, I've seen most of the time that there is some kind of break communication between these two teams. And this is my personal opinion, of course. I think that there should be better interaction between the IT Ops and DevOps. I've seen cases, for instance, in which here they are building states or testing code for an environment that is different to what they have in ITOps, in production. So that's why I insist that the communication between DevOps and ITOps must be, I think, improved or more fluent. Because from this side, they can provide valuable input about testing. And it's very important that these people know which kind of tests are being run. And I think that if there is better communication and if they play together, it will be much better, or it will be they will be more successful in expanding and deploying at the enterprise in large scale. So, and it's my experience in many customers I've seen this in the field, this kind of communication issue. So, Pedro, do you want?
So, while we are talking about the connection between ITOps and DevOps, I'm going to show you how SaltStack tests Salt using Jenkins, trying to at least shed some light on how that could, how this usage could be used to test, for example, Salt states, because the principles are mostly the same. So the first thing that I will do is open a pull request against Salt. So sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry, that's this one. I want my own. So. And I don't know if any of you has ever submitted code to Salt, but the process of submitting code to Salt usually starts with something like this. So, sorry, let me get the right branch. Okay, so you've done some changes to the Salt code base, and you'll open a pull request. So this is the usual process of opening a pull request against Salt. And your pull request is accepted on GitHub. So what happens now? We have set up a Jenkins server that has a hook connected to GitHub, and it listens to open pull request events. So as you start to see it in action, it starts off a build, and let's just follow that build so I can explain what's going on. And let's go to the console output. So in Salt, we have to test in a lot of scenarios. Salt is targeted to several distributions, and we need to make sure that we continuously support the distributions equally, and that with this change we don't break something on a totally unrelated distribution. So this pull request goes through a few steps. First, we lint our code just to make sure that some rules regarding code layout and how code is written, we do some checks against that, and that's the lint step. And then we check against two usually commonly used distributions, which is Ubuntu and CentOS. So what we are doing here with lint, we are just checking some code checks to see if there are some common code mistakes that have slipped in the pull requests. If the code, for example, we try to support both Python 2 and Python 3, and we make some naive checks on that code, and then we go to testing on each of these distributions. Let me just open one of them. and this will show you a little bit more of what Salt is actually doing behind the scenes. So, on Jenkins, we actually use Salt Cloud to spin off our own machines. And the process is we have a step which clones the repository. It stores that repository and then shares them with the lints, and this build tests builds. We decompress that. We say Salt Cloud, please spin me up a VM, in this case, a Sent VM. We will not be seeing the end of this because the Salt test suite currently takes about 45 minutes to 1 hour to complete. So it will take quite some time. But I will just talk about what the process is. So Salt Cloud spin-offs a machine. It installs a minion. It bootstraps a minion on the machine. As soon as we get a connection from that minion, we start prepping the distribution. We install the testing dependencies. We upload the Salt code to this specific code revision. We run the test suite, and once we are done with the test suite, we download the test reports from that VM, and we'll then display this on the reports on Jenkins. So, trying to connect this procedure with what could be applied to Salt states, it could be something quite similar. You would spin off a machine, you would run your states, and you would run some assertions based on the states that you would run. And this would, of course, would have to be run either using a Python script or shell script, or a library that could check if a package was indeed installed, if you are opening ports, if a port was opened. But the same principle applies to what we, SaltStack, are doing to Salt, to what an IT ops and DevOps could do with, for example, Salt states. So by now I'd like to ask if does anyone have any questions to what I've been explaining here, both me and Adrian? Okay, so I think since we will not be able to see the finish of this, unless this particular one runs pretty fast, which I'm sure it won't. But if it really does not finish, I will open another one just for us to see some reporting on Jenkins and how we could tie that to testing Salt states, for example. Want to carry on?
So let's talk about the SaltStack plugin. So for you using Jenkins and Salt, have you been using the SaltStack plugin, Jenkins? No? You know it? Okay. So, initially when I found this plugin, I thought that most people knew about it, but I discovered that it was not well known, at least since I was working for a customer that was using Jenkins intensively, but they don't know about it. So that's why I included this here in this session. The developer is very active, so it's a very active project. I've been in touch with him, with Christian McHugh, a few weeks ago, solving some bugs, etc. So it's a very active project. It allows you to execute using the client interface, the API, using the local batch, and runner. So local is the standard way of running a Salt command, like Salt target test.ping. The local batch is when you want to run the same command to a few minions at a time. And as you can see, it's, it has a nice form with your API, your username, type of authentication, and the client interface you want to use, and then the parameters to send to the API. And also you can run salt run or run commands, which can be used for running orchestration jobs in the master. So it can be used, for instance, to fire up your VMs for testing. This is nice. You can send pillar data here. So it will be your interface name, your virtual machine names, or whatever else you need as part of your orchestration to spin up the VMs. So most of you know Jenkins, so I'm going to skip this, but just to show that there are a lot of options to build your projects in Jenkins. You can add parameters, you can run Windows commands, shell scripts, and this is the way of creating a Salt command, send a message to Salt API. So the idea here could be using Jenkins and Salt to deploy the virtual machines. So when you have a new state and you want to test it, so you can use Jenkins to talk to Salt and deploy a virtual machine, configure the environment, the testing environment, build the code, install any additional software, and run the test that you want to run. Okay, so it depends, of course, up to you if you want to use Jenkins, if you want to use Salt, if you want to use scripts. But there you have another options for your testing. Any questions so far about the SaltStack plugin? No? Anyone is using it?
So what is the output? Is there any option, for example, when a job fails? Is this after default that if the job command fails, that it's unstable?
Yes. Yes. Yes, you will see comments here in the console output. Okay, so in order to make it work, you need. Sorry, who has installed it? Who is using it? SaltStack plugin. What is your experience?
Mine?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, what have you done?
Sorry?
What have you done?
So basically, we are deploying SaltMaster with Jenkins. So we've got SaltMaster, and Jenkins is like a way for us to call SaltMaster and deploy to targets. With Jenkins, we've got role-based access control, and just we have a history of what's happening when. We started this a couple of months ago, almost a year ago. We had quite a big problem as this plugin was totally broken. Because it resulted as successful build even if some states returned false. And one of my friends in the team, which is a Java developer, just rewrote this plugin and put a pull request.
Okay.
And after a few weeks, guys just digested what we've done. Oh, thank you. Now we are replacing it. So yes, my friend fixed it. And yeah, this is pretty nice and pretty useful. And especially if there is not just a local, but also the orchestrating. Yeah? So you can do really a lot and just very complex deployment in one step. And just without any, like now we've got enterprise version, which probably has some, role-based access control and some features. Yeah, but a couple of months ago there was nothing like it. Jenkins was only 2
So things are getting more integrated. Anyone else that want to share some experience?
I haven't started using the Jenkins plugin yet, but I probably will do. What I'm doing is I'm taking the build data as for the version of the build data, not necessarily a SaltStack, but a deployment as a code. Grabbing the version back and pushing that into our deployment, our deployment method using the API. And so we've got to see if we can insert that version data into a build using the plugin.
Okay. Yes, I've been using it for orchestration and sending pillar information, and seems to work. And as I said, the developer is, at least he was very responsive. So if you use it and find any bug, send him an email and probably. You
probably will want to try to parse the output to pass to the Salt API. So I stumbled upon this SaltStack plugin a while back, but I just look at it out of curiosity because when we started using Jenkins and Salt, there was nothing like it, and these days it makes total sense. But switching our current build process to using the Salt API will require quite an amount of work, and we just right now don't have that free resource to do that. And we actually use Salt Cloud to do something similar, but I'm guessing for your particular needs, you would need to do some kind of parsing. And from the response that Adrian has got from the developer, if you say, look, I need to either grab an environment and variable or parse some output, I'm sure he will allow you to do something like that and use that using that passing pillar data, because you are using Salt API based on a shell script, more or less. In Jenkins. You're calling Salt API using a shell script?
No, on this, that's the direction I was going to go.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Using, probably just writing a formal or Salt state that would then take that, the data, or the variable data from Jenkins and put that into Salt.
Mm-hmm.
Use for deployment would actually be used for injecting build data into Salt.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that if you stumble on anything, I'm sorry, I just got sidetracked because no, I thought we were seeing the end of this, but we are not. Sorry, it takes quite a while, and I was just surprised. But I'm sure the developer will be quite responsive. He's actually here at SaltStack. I met him. So it's probably just a matter of asking him what would be the amount of work of trying to achieve what you are trying to achieve. Well, right now it's just functions running against with the Salt test suite.
So, a few notes about installing and configuration. It was simple. I use Salt 2015.8.3, Salt API, same version, cherry pie. The only thing, but it's in our documentation, is to use this version of POpenSSL. There is some kind of bug. It's in the documentation, but then everything was pretty normal. You have to enable the Salt API in the Salt master. It's done by these lines here. Then you have to generate the certificates. Of course, all this is in our documentation, okay? And then start the API on the Salt master. You have to create a user, Jenkins, or any name you want, and then grant permission. In this case, I grant all permission to the user. To install Jenkins, I think the only issue I had was that I had Tomcat installed, and it was running on the same port. And in my case, I had to stop Tomcat and then run the installation. That's the only issue. Then I was able to change the Jenkins port. Then you have to import the SSL certificates. Basically, that's all. You start the service, and once you start the Jenkins service, and once you start it, you can install the SaltStack plugin from the Jenkins console. If you want to test the API, you can start the Salt API with this command, salt API -l debug. Then, all this is in our documentation, by the way, but you can run command like this to test login, and you should see something like this as return. Okay, this means that the API is working. Once you log in, you can start running command. In this case, I'm running a test.ping. You can read it here, function test.ping. My target is my Salt server. Another common example, you can get grains item, ID, OS finger, Salt version. Also, I'm running this on my Salt master. Probably this is more interesting. I'm running an orchestration here. This is an orchestration. The orchestration state is called org DDNS version 5, in which I'm updating the DNS. So as part of building the environment, I could update DNS with a dynamic record.
So let me just bring out our build and explain what would happen next before we enter in the Q&A. Eventually, this build will finish. We'll get some reporting of the tests that passed, the tests that failed. Sorry. At which time we'll update the Jenkins pull request with information of the build status. And if you used GitHub and ever submitted a pull request, if that button becomes green, then all checks have passed and it's good to go and to test it. On the Jenkins side, let me just show you another build. Sorry. So for example, let me show you a blue one, which means passed. Sorry, I'm triggering a lot of stuff because I'm not used to a Mac. So test result, no failures. And this is the report output of our test suite. And this is for the build. And let me see if I can open up the pull request. So this is the one. Oh, it's already gone. We deleted it quite fast. So this is what would happen. We would have those two VMs finish up, report the status. And if it all goes green, then someone from the SaltStack core team would evaluate your changes with assuring us that nothing broke, at least nothing that was previously being tested broke. And then we merge this to either the develop branch or one of the version branches that Salt has. And when you merge that, we have another set of builds, which instead of running just these 2 VMs, we run, I think, these days around 7 or 8. So this is just testing the 2 distributions, and we are testing at least 8 builds, so 2 or 3 versions of a distribution, and the same could be applied to the IT ops and DevOps paradigm. And I think I will now ask you for questions if anyone has them.
Yeah, well, the idea of our session was to try to get the idea of using this method, Jenkins, the thing that you know, to test salt states. As I was saying before, if you are in the IT ops side, probably you don't know about Jenkins. It's a good idea that you, from the DevOps, help in the testing of salt states, help to drive the process, etc. Build the rules, you know, have a healthy salt implementation.
So I noticed your builds were taking quite a while. Are you doing a full suite test?
Yeah.
So do you have a way to break that down into individual salt state tests? So if you're making one or changing one state, it only test out one state.
Well, if we do apply this to a salt state scenario, I would say yes, because we just want to test one salt state, and we could find out which other states depend on this state and also test those, but not the full test suite. But of course, this for salt itself, which has a massive code base, we cannot just test that. We could add some code filtering. For example, if someone is updating documentation, we probably just need to see if the docs are building and not run the test suite, but we still run the full test suite. So to answer your question, that could be possible because you don't need to run all of your states. It would just be a matter of asking it what changed, see what states changed, and then look up in Salt which states depend on that state and just run those. So theoretically, yes, it would be possible. Anyone else?
The output log from the Jenkins plugin that will return console output.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still limited by the return of Salt, the Salt master getting all minion returns properly? So you might miss events in there, or would you does it actually pull the API to get a full request of all events?
So I'm going to defer to the question is if the Salt API command executed using the Jenkins SaltStack plugin will wait for all minion returns and return its status with all minions returning, or if one of the minions fails to report, if it will just carry on.
No, it will carry on.
It will carry on,
Yeah.
but if one of them fails, it will mark it as a failed build.
Yeah.
Okay. Does this answer your question?
No, I was asking more in, so Salt, if let's say I ran this against 100 minions for a benchmark test, is there possible that the 99th minion might not return in the time that the Salt execution command is allowed to be open?
Mm-hmm.
And so that event might not be translated into that output log. So would you still see, but if I check the job ID for that 99th minion, it was succeeded. So does the plugin pull from the API events to get a success log from there, or does it pull from the output that's generated by the console execution?
Oh, okay. So I have not used the SaltStack plugin, but I'm pretty sure that it's querying the API. So any information that you're getting back, So you are getting an output from the console, but I'm pretty sure that it's querying the SaltStack the Salt master for the information.
On the plugin, I have used the plugin very lightly, and you can configure the timeout to run that job so that if you're having that issue, you could post the timeout so that Jenkins doesn't kill it before that return happens.
Okay, so I'm guessing this would be a matter of finding who coded the plugin, because he's at SaltConf, and asking for that feature. I'm sure you would be gladly contribute that to the code.
Yes, it's around here. Okay.
What are the best practices for writing tests for your salt states? Do you go as granular as writing a file manage, so I'll write my state twice when I see the salt statement to the test? Or do you pull out and put something more complicated than I think about?
So could you please repeat?
Basically, if you're writing tests for your salt states, you write the state twice. Once in the actual SLS language, once in your favorite testing framework.
Okay.
Do you go that granular, or do you wait until you have something more complicated than I?
So I tried to attend a talk this morning with a guy that actually solved that part, at least for his company. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend it to the end, but someone has done that. But you would write your state file once. You would have to find a testing framework, and these days there are. For example, I know that PyTest has a plugin which will run checks for is a specific package installed, is a port open, and this kind of logic would be separate from your state file. So you would open a state file, and you would create a test case where you would assert if what is being promised to be done on that state file is actually done. And I can point you to the PyTest plugin, and if you have trouble finding it, the one that actually asserts if a package is installed or if a port is open, just give me a few minutes to look it up, and I will get back to you. Because I know it's there, I've seen it, I just can't remember the name right now.
I think it's...
Okay, so thank you all for listening to us.